everybody, it's your boy. I feel like yapping today, so I'm going to do a bit more yapping. Let's talk about Guild Wars. Okay, so let's talk about my history with Guild Wars for a hot minute. I'm a diehard Guild Wars 1 fan. I played it for about as long as it was alive. Well, it currently is, but it's still being supported now, which is great. And it was like my first real MMO, like multiplayer online game with other people, other than RuneScape, I suppose. It's the one where I started interacting with people from other places. So I have a fondness for it, like people do for every first MMO they've ever played. So this kind of threw me for a loop that they're working on a third one. I really liked 2 at the start. I think the design philosophy behind 2 was really good at the beginning. Let's mute this but keep it on repeat because it's a good trailer. I think it's a solid teaser trailer. Beta in fall, that is crazy. That's crazy, we might have a beta next year. So, Guild Wars 2, I am not as big of a fan of the direction they went with Guild Wars 2. I have fond memories of it for sure because my friend group, I won't say any names, just keep people anonymous for now. Our guild was really looking forward to 2, and we did everything we could in 1 for the Hall of Monument stuff because you gotta, and then we came to 2, and for about a year and some change, we had a blast with it. We met a lot of new people, new friends, and we liked how they designed the game, but a little after, I think, the main story, we finished the main story and we started doing our thing is doing content and doing roleplay. That's I would define what I like to do in MMOs is doing the most fun content, getting cool stuff, the usual bag, and roleplay. For us, the roleplay scene in this game was very interesting. It was new territory for a lot of us, for me especially, because it was the first time I roleplayed in a fantasy setting very heavily. And roleplay can be very it's very different than what I expected. And a little over time, you start to recognize certain communities and certain people in roleplay circles, and it gets a little I won't delve too deep into it, but it got to a point where the roleplay became a stress factor for us. For me especially, since I was leading the guild at the time. I was the one that was kind of pushing for reaching out outside of our group, making up characters, for the story and all this other stuff. I won't get too deep into the weeds of it, but Guild Wars 3, man. This threw me for a loop. It looks good just from the teaser trailer, and arenanet is one of those devs that, while I don't agree with a lot of their choices that they made moving from 1 to 2, I think this is a really nice pulse of life in the MMO genre, which kind of has slowed down a lot in the last 10 years. So overall, I think it's a good thing. I don't know if my friends will try it. I'll definitely look at it when it comes out. I'll check out the beta. Because Guild Wars was a big, formative game for me in my online life. Like, it showed me like how cool fantasy setting can be. It showed me like, oh, an MMO doesn't have to be this theme park thing. It can be just something you kind of like play for a bit and then forget about and then come back, which I've been doing with Guild Wars 2. This trailer was like, and the promise of it more than the trailer itself, me want to go back to Guild Wars 2, and that's what I've done. I've went back and played. I played a little bit of Living Story before I left, but I went back and played Heart of Thorns. I went through its story, went through its zones, got a taste of masteries, and I just finished last night the MSQ for Path of Fire, and it's been a nice change of pace because my main game since then has been FF14 in the MMO space, and 14 has also kind of stagnated a little bit. It's been spinning its wheels a bit with how it does like its story and how it's formulaic. It's not necessarily a bad thing because people know what to expect, and it's kind of like a comforting, nice feeling. But going back to Guild Wars 2 has been interesting. It's reminded me of stuff that I didn't like for sure, but it has stuff that I do miss. Like zones, how they do level design and maps is really cool still. I think they're a little like, speaking from like the perspective of somebody who likes to do roleplay out in the world as like a writer and a role player, it's a little hard to do that in Guild Wars because the world is like really dangerous and there's like really dense mob density. So like if you're trying to go out there to role play, you're gonna have to deal with like the game fighting you, and you don't want that. But the level design has been really impressive me, especially in Heart of Thorns. Those first few areas are really cool. You do get a little tired of like navigation. It gets kind of harder later on, but I think just from a sheer design standpoint, the maps are like really layered and dense, and it's genuinely impressive. Like it's comparable to like a single player games, like maybe not as good as like a FromSoft level design, but it's very, there's thought put into it, and I like that a lot. Path of Fire doesn't have as layered map design, but I like the setting a lot because it uses a lot of areas from Guild Wars 1, like the Crystal Desert and the Desolation. It's not as layered, it's more flat because, you know, it's a desert, and it's not as interesting to look at as like a freaky jungle that's trying to kill you, but it has its parts. And I think since finishing its MSQ and finishing Heart of Thorns, I think Guild Wars 2's strengths definitely lie in the open world and the feel of getting around it and like the freedom of it. You can, what I've been doing, which I feel like is something that everybody starts to do in Guild Wars, is you kind of crew like just crap, and it's not like bad crap. You just get a lot of stuff. You get a lot of rewards just by like playing through the game, and that's a nice feeling to have coming from 14, which is kind of a bit more, maybe not stingy. Its reward structure is just different. It's very like currency based, which Guild Wars 2 is too, but you also get a lot of gold, you get a lot of like drops, you know. 14 surprisingly doesn't have a lot of loot, and if you like loot, Guild Wars is really good for that. I do like loot, so that's been nice. But I would say a strength of 14 that has over Guild Wars 2 is that Guild Wars 2's story is kind of like, it reminds me of what people say when they say Marvel-esque dialogue or we didn't speak type dialogue, where it's kind of like self-aware and like maybe a little too quippy. And being thrown into the middle of that after like playing through Dawn Trail, I was a bit more forgiving of it, but going into Path of Fire, I definitely noticed that they got a bit more serious, but it's still the characterization in Guild Wars isn't as strong as something like Final Fantasies, which is fine. That's not a deal breaker for me, but as a person who loves to write and roleplay, it's noticeable how they write their characters in comparison to like 14, which is trying to play out like a whole 60-hour JRPG, whereas Guild Wars kind of, and I think they kind of admitted to this, that their writing and their approach to dialogue and stuff is very seasonal television. It's not like that all the time. I quite like the idle stuff, like the stuff you used to see on the wild, like NPCs chattering and stuff like that. But the main story, like the crux of like the commander and speaking with like your companions in its story, it feels very like somebody will say like a quip after like a serious moment in a story, and it kind of takes you out of it a little bit. It doesn't do it all the time, but it does it enough for me to notice it. And it's definitely not its strong suit, I would say, and I think that's fine. People tend to talk about all the other stuff in Guild Wars, like the build variety and the maps and the meta events and stuff like that, more than they talk about like the story. I hardly ever see it mentioned. I think a story is important. I think it's a good like, it gives flavor to like what you're doing, right? And I think if you have a good story backed by good gameplay systems, that is like the true game. And I don't know if they'll do that with 3, but on the gameplay side, it looks promising. I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out, because I think it's, even if it does end up like not quite jibing with me, I think it's good to have another MMO in the world out there that's being done by a bigger studio that can find some success, because it'll make other games like maybe like 14 or WoW try harder. I think arenanet likes to push their ideas maybe a little too hard sometimes, but I think if they can pull this off, it'll be a good like, hey, we need to stop doing the same stuff we do for all our games and try to like push like the genre forward. Okay, that's me done yapping about that.